We have
Rams Vikings.
Rams Vikings. Minnesota heading to LA. Basically a home game for anyone that goes to LA. Uh, Obviously, it's the middle of the season. We got a lot of injuries. They seem to be piling up for every team. Um, it's kind of a war in the trenches. Whoever makes it out this week, it seems like Minnesota's the healthiest team. I was surprised. You mentioned last week, Turtle, Cam Akers picked up by Minnesota. Uh, I I took that as Aaron Jones not going to be ready for this week. It turned out he did play last week. He
He
played
looked
pretty
he looked
well.
pretty good,
Yeah, just as
like he
explosive.
has all year. So
Right.
um, I guess Cam Akers is back to his relegated third string spot on any team that he
Right.
goes to at this point. So um,
Absolutely. And then Jonathan Greenard, I mean, man, he's looked phenomenal as well. A couple injuries. We didn't see TJ Hawkinson. I think LA still getting back healthy. Cooper Cup, who knows what his availability will be this week, but by all
Puka
indications,
Nakua was activated off IR, I believe.
yep,
Yeah.
21-day window activated. You guys can pretty much talk about each team. It's really tough for me. I could talk about either team for a couple minutes. I guess we could start off with Minnesota. How'd you like how they looked against Detroit? Seems like a real contender they had to play. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the stats for that game, really interesting. It looked like the most even box score that I think you'll probably ever see. Minnesota jumped out to the early 10-0 lead, and Detroit's offense seems like it hasn't missed a beat. Came right back, no problem. And then the second half, I feel like it all belonged to Minnesota. Um, so a real back
Mhm.
and forth game. Honestly, I don't downgrade either team from a power ratings perspective. I mean, they played just about as even against each other as you possibly could. Lions obviously winning a last second field goal. Um, I think both teams kind of lived up to expectations in this game. Um, and I don't downgrade either side. It's interesting to hear the rumors about Minnesota and Matt Stafford today. I don't know if I believe them, to be quite honest with you.
No.
Sam Darnold's playing at an MVP level. I think that was just
Yeah.
some of those Twitter accounts that are engagement farming or something. So um, now with the Rams, the interesting thing is Cooper Cup, and I could see that totally being a possibility of him getting traded.
Hmm.
And on this very podcast, I mentioned that before the Rams had their bye, the Rams were going to be a team to buy on coming out of their bye just because of how, I guess, relatively close in record they are to the rest of their division. It appears that the Rams brass disagrees with me, and they might be in sell mode here. And going into a short week game, don't know if we'll see Cooper Cup if that is either injury slash trade related. Obviously, we talked about Puka Nakua leading into the pod. His 21-day practice window's opened. I doubt he makes it out there this week. And the Vikings are laying 3 points on the road. Well, they'll probably have a 50-50 crowd split. So, I mean, at this point, I don't downgrade Minnesota for the way they played on Sunday. They played probably the other best team in the entire conference and lost in the last second field goal. And there's some weird stuff floating around there with the Rams. So I got to lean Minnesota here on the short week as the healthier team,
I
and with
I
the
I
Rams possibly in sell mode.
I agree with you, Turtle. I think it also might be a bounce back game for the Minnesota defense. I mean, you put a defense like that against an explosive offense like Detroit. I mean, there's gonna be fireworks going both ways. I mean, I think we all predicted that thing was gonna be a shootout, and the availability of Cooper Cup, as you mentioned, if he remains a Ram by the end of the week, I mean, that is yet to be seen. I think a big thing for Minnesota as well is that they're going to be likely getting T.J. Hawkinson back, which is going to be a major pass catcher. One of their premier targets last year, and until he got hurt. I don't know obviously what the game plan will be in terms of the snap count he might have with Johnny Munt, but I mean they've been able to move the ball, and we saw it even last week with not even an A game, probably a C minus game from Sam Darnold. They were still able to move the ball down the field. Where the points were coming from weren't exactly from his arm, but I do kind of expect this one to be relatively high scoring. I think they're with the questions that LA does have on defense, to this point this year. But it remains to be seen, and who knows what version of Sam Darnold we're going to get
Yeah.
as we say week in and week out.
Well,
Yeah.
can I pose a question to you guys? I didn't mean to cut
Mhm.
you off, Christian, but I just want to know your guys' take. Like, do you think that Minnesota can make a Super Bowl run with Sam Darnold as their quarterback? Or I know we touched on it leading into the game about these Stafford rumors, and again, I don't really believe them. But how do you guys think about Sam Darnold? And do you think that he's really the guy that can take Minnesota to the promised land, or do you think there's some smoke there with maybe like, okay, they get a guy in Stafford that's been there and done that before, and Kevin O'Connell was the OC for the Rams for a number of years, so system familiarity there would make sense. Just
Yeah.
want to know your guys' take on Sam Darnold and that offense in general.
Yeah. To that point, I think the window would definitely get bigger or move closer in time for the Vikings. But I personally love their succession plan at the current moment. We've heard Sam Darnold getting comps, at least in San Francisco's locker room, to guys like Steve Young. I know it sounds outlandish, but they do have a really, really good offensive line. And the guy I wanted to really point out was Christian Darrisaw. He's been phenomenal. Um, and you got two bookend tackles in Minnesota. I think a lot of quarterbacks would have success with two bookend tackles. Um, Now Stafford, that's his biggest issue right now. I think in LA is they don't have the protection for him. Uh, but to me personally, knowing that JJ McCarthy is there, only 21 years old, uh, Sam Darnold's only 26 years old. To me, it just seems like
That's
the
crazy to me.
I know.
He feels
The-
like he's 30.
exactly. So the succession plan seems like it's in uh, a very solid place in Minnesota. I don't know why you would mess with it. I also think LA could probably get a little more value if they really held on. And I also think why keep Stafford in the division if there are other teams that want him for sure.
And to this point, I mean, Minnesota's gone from plus 8,000 to plus 1,200 to win the Super Bowl, which is, I mean, that's a significant drop.
Sure.
In what they're gonna get. I mean, they might be without Harrison Phillips and Evans and Blake Cashman on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
So, curious
Cashman
to
didn't
see.
play last week.
Cashman didn't play last week. I'm curious to see, I think, obviously the strength of their team is going to be that defense and staying healthy. But I mean, if Sam Darnold is able to keep his weapons and, obviously getting TJ Hawkinson back, yeah, to be able to get more bodies to distribute the ball to, Aaron Jones, I mean, we're going to see what happens there. But I think Ty Chandler's serviceable enough. I think there's questions about them maybe going all the way, but I mean, definitely it's a team that's probably will make the playoffs and has a very good chance they don't have a bye to maybe win one or even two games.
Sure.
Yeah,
Now
80 to 1 to 12 to 1 is a insane drop.
crazy. Yeah, yeah. I had one question. I do think Cooper is going to play this week. It could very well be his last game with the Rams. But the question I want you guys to answer is if they do win, I know Turtle, you believe a certain way about the Rams. You're still in on the Rams in some degree, but if they do win, do you keep it together? Do you try and get healthy? Uh, is there any type of targets that you would go after if you're the Rams if you do keep it together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess any of those offensive linemen that could possibly be available either on the Browns or I know they need help on defense. I like Gerard Verse a lot as a rookie, and
Mhm.
the other Florida State fit Braden Fisk.
Yep.
That 1-2. I think they're really good on the defensive line. I know they were banged up in the secondary, but I think they got Williams back. No, I think he played against the
Yeah,
Raiders.
I believe he did. Let me double check.
Yeah, I
He's no
think
longer
they
on the
got him
injury
back.
report, so I think they
Yeah.
got him back last week. And then Kobe Durant also played very well last week as well.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting. I could see like them trading Cup, and maybe it's specifically just for cap reasons. Like you
Sure.
take on half the money, and it's essentially like paying for a second round pick. Um, and look, I mean, I love Cooper Cup as much as the next guy. He's been super productive, but he hasn't been on the field for you in a while, anyways. Um,
Absolutely.
so maybe it's just a singular, like in a vacuum, like if they can get something for Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua comes back, and maybe they start trying to play some young guys at receiver, like they have been. Other than I guess like they trot Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson out there,
Yeah.
but you know I can understand them trying to get a pick out of Cooper Cup. It's the Stafford stuff that I think is just total nonsense. But
Sure.
it's interesting to hear those rumors floating around when, to be honest, you're not that far off in the division. I mean, the rest of the division is Arizona, who squeaked by the Chargers
Hmm.
last night. Um, Seattle's got their own set of issues.
Yeah. 4-3.
And if, yeah, 4-3. And the 49ers 3-4, they're I feel like they're disintegrating a little bit just health wise and losing to the Chiefs the way that they did. So
Sure.
you're still in the fight there, and the trade deadline's what, next Tuesday, correct?
It's 2 weeks away.
2 weeks away. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, they've got some time to, because look, the max value I think you're going to get out of any of these guys they trade is probably right at the deadline, I would presume. So I think they should probably wait and see how things shake out over the next couple of weeks. If they can keep the division lead within a couple games. They can win on Thursday, take the extra time, and then win these two games, and they get back close to 500. They might still be in the mix. So,
And
we'll
Yeah.
see.
one of the names that was actually floated around for LA, to possibly be someone that they do ship off is Matt Stafford, and that's after the Vikings had inquired about his availability, going forward. I think that depending on how the game goes, that might be a trade talk individually that heats up. Especially if the Vikings are able to pull it out. Sam Darnold doesn't play as well as he may. I mean, it may make sense for a team like Minnesota, who is looking like they're all in for this year, especially with getting T.J. Hawkinson back healthy and getting more weapons. They're available for whoever's going to be throwing the ball to, maybe inquire about the availability of Matt Stafford. I know there's been other teams floated around for his name, but that'll be one to watch after this game.
Yeah, and I believe I got to check the source on this because another thing I saw on Twitter, but I think the Vikings inquired about Stafford before the season too, to check his availability.
Sure.
Um, there's obviously familiarity there with Kevin O'Connell, so it wouldn't shock me at all.
Anything could happen.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think we're all in agreement that we're going to take Minnesota -3. Are you guys going to take the points on this, or LA
I'm
maybe?
laying it with Minnesota if I'm doing anything. I don't think you can touch the Rams on a short week like this.
Sure.
And again, I don't downgrade Minnesota at all for the way that they played on Sunday. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
And
dead even game.
Great team. Great team.
one
Yeah.
one 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 other line that would maybe consider is Rams team total under 21.5. And for them to score 3 touchdowns against this defense, it might take a lot of moving the ball down the field. And I just think how Minnesota's defense is anticipated to play. I think they'll bounce back after last week. Obviously wasn't their best showing. I think the Vikings are the way to go. And then maybe if you're going to bet on the defense, under 21.5
Sure.
for Matt Stafford and
Yeah,
the
I
Rams.
like that as well. This is going to be like a get right respite game for Brian Flores after going. I mean,
Sure.
I'm sure we'll get to the Lions at some point. We got to give them their props with how they prepared for that defense. But yeah, I agree with you there, Mike. I think the team total for Rams under 21. I think that's strong.